All right, guys, what's up? Welcome back to a very quick edition of Strongman Theory. Today, we are actually going to be releasing two videos, but I feel I have to cover something that is rather important, but it is a nuance of the 7 categories of strongman movement. So today, on episode 7.5, we will be addressing event expansion, or the discipline versus the element category, right? So the way that I like to define a discipline is a pure event type. And the way that I define an element is an element of one of the event types. And so you will notice that if we look through the older videos, we do not have specific training days for things like miscellaneous events necessarily, or things that were categorized like we'll say grip. There wasn't a specific grip day, and that's because those don't actually fall into the category of a discipline. They're an element. So let's break those 7 categories apart real quick. Some of the disciplines are pressing. We see a lot of pressing event types. Dynamic and movement, that includes front carries, Husafelt, yoke, farmers would fall into that category. Things where you need to be quick, dynamic, movement. Static events also fall into that category. Deadlifts, you know what I'm talking about. The fourth and final discipline of those 7 categories is actually loading, and that's things like stone loading, sandbag loading, odd object loading. People that are watching this series are very familiar with these kind of events, and that those events are different categories. Those are disciplines, pure event types, right? They typically don't involve many of the other, we'll say, categories as we've used in the past. And the other 3 that are left over are actually classified as elements. And this is the structure that I've designed. It's the way that I like to explain it to people. It's the way that I like to break it down. And it's the way that I like to analytically decompose it before I recompose or construct a framework for training optimally. So those 3 event types that are left over are grip. We very seldom see grip pure events. And so that's, a grip event would oftentimes be a farmer's walk, which is actually primarily a dynamic movement. You could make an argument for the Hercules hold, but I would also make an argument for the fact that it is grip, but it's also a rather static type event. We could go back and forth about it. The second event or category that is actually an element is medleys. So medleys, we've talked about what they are, but they're a combination of other events. That is still a skill. It's an element that is composed of the other disciplines. And then miscellaneous, which is, that falls under elements because miscellaneous is oftentimes things like a keg throw, which would involve dynamic movement. But miscellaneous is not strictly a type. It is just kind of the black box of what is left over. And so now that we've defined what disciplines and elements are and what actually falls and qualifies under the discipline category and the element category, now we're going to do a little bit of review and talk about what that looks like in the structure. And again, this is like supplementary before we really get into episode 8, which is going to be on the actual execution, or I should say the structuring of the pressing. And a quick side note, episode 8 is going to be about pressing, episode 9 is going to be dynamic movement, episode 10 is going to be grip, episode 11 is going to be static, episode 12 is going to be loading, and then 13 will be medleys, 14 will be miscellaneous. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that content. It might get a little bit dry, but it's going to have some good information for you. So, review of the weekly programming. If you look through those old videos, you'll see that we broke our training into 4 days. 4 days a week of lifting and 3 days a week of rest or recovery, active recovery type things. And those days were pressing, dynamic, miscellaneous, oftentimes with grip, if applicable, if our dynamic training is not involving farmers essentially. And then the 4th day is going to be static and loading, and typically those are in an even odd kind of bouncing back and forth structure. Medley can go pretty much anywhere where it makes sense at the time. And so you can see that those 4 categories reflect, or those 4 training days reflect the 4 disciplines really, right? We've lumped these together. We've taken all of these and kind of compressed them into a single day. And these 2 are so important that they get their own days, right? So I just wanted to take a moment, break this down, explain it a little bit more thoroughly, and make sure that people understood the difference between a discipline and an element, because that is something that I will be addressing, and it's going to change the way that we look at these categories and the way that we are going to focus on making ourselves better at these categories, if it is a discipline versus an element. So I hope you guys have found this really informative. If you haven't already, please like the video, share, subscribe. That does help. I see people commenting about this series as well as the Basics of Strongman series on the Starting Strongman group. I do appreciate that very much. All those shout outs, everybody who is participating in that, I appreciate that very much. I do take this rather seriously. I want to get all of this information out there for people for free forever. That's why I'm making it. And I hope you guys truly appreciate it. And yeah, I guess that's all I got for you today. So be on the lookout for episode 8. It should be getting released later the same day that this will be getting released. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. So thank you so much.